All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new exciting episode of Top 5 with MovieByte. Thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Ruben here. Tonight, I'm going to be sharing with all of you my top 5 favorite films from Tim Burton. This was suggested from a friend of mine when I asked 2 weeks ago what was the next director that I should pick movies from. And he mentioned Tim Burton, and why not? You know, he has a massive filmography. And we've all grown watching Tim Burton, and we have Beetlejuice coming out in about 3-4 weeks from now. So I think it was perfect for me to share with all of you my favorite films. I hope anybody that's out there watching can join me in this live session and share their views with their top 5, or if they disagree with my picks, I would love to debate that if anybody's out there with me tonight. A little shout out again, my brother-in-arm's bike up. He's still out there traveling. We'll be back in a couple of weeks for our traditional MovieByte podcast. A couple of exciting announcements next week. We have a very special episode from a recommendation from another friend of mine. He's actually going to be invited as a special guest, Mr. Adrian. He's going to pop up over there in a few. We're going to do something special, something unique that we haven't done before, and I'm actually very excited. Next week on MovieByte, we're going to tackle soundtracks. And what better way to tackle the Crow soundtrack with the new movie coming out next week? I'm excited. There's a lot of information out there, lots of great song artists I'm super excited to talk about. So, that being said, so anybody out there, my friends in Puerto Rico, stay safe with the tropical storm heading your way. So let's begin. Before we dive into my top 5 of Tim Burton, we got to understand who Mr. Tim Burton is. Mr. Timothy Walter Burton was born on August 25th, 1958. He is known for pioneering what in Hollywood call the gothic culture in the American film industry. It's a very relevant theme that all his films have, that started with his animation style. For those who didn't know, Tim Burton worked for Walt Disney Animation. He was a concept artist for films like Fox and the Hound, The Black Cauldron, but none of his drawings actually made it into the film. If I'm not mistaken, and I couldn't find this out there, but I think he eventually got fired from that Disney division, and he went on to do his own things. Burton's made his directorial debut directing Paul Rubens and Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which is a cult classic out there. It's a fun movie to watch. It's a little bit different from what we've used to seeing from Mr. Tim Burton himself, but it's because of Pee-wee's Big Adventure that eventually it led him to do Beetlejuice in 1988, and the rest is history. From his collection of filmography, it's tough to narrow down to a top 5. He has movies that we're going to talk about, other movies that I just decided not to talk about. Among them, Planet of the Apes, which he attempted to reboot that franchise, and in a single span, putting Mark Wahlberg in it, crash landed on that. He also has tackled franchises like Dark Shadows, which is also a box office bomb. He tackled Dumbo for Disney, not panned out very well, but he also did Alice in Wonderland, which actually was pretty good for Disney. And he did his own version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which also has gained a little bit of a following since then. Tim Burton currently is expecting to be releasing Beetlejuice on September 6th, and he's currently filming season 2 of Wednesday, which is a spinoff of the Addams Family character starring Jenna Ortega in the title role. So, that being said, couple of things that before I dive into top five. I want to mention out there that no, Nightmare Before Christmas is not on this list because it was not directed by Tim Burton. For anybody out there that throws that name out there, Nightmare Before Christmas was not directed by him. It is a movie inspired by a poem that he wrote. The animation, the characters are created by him, and he was a producer. Nightmare Before Christmas was directed by Henry Selick, who went on to direct James and the Giant Peach and Monkey Bone with Brendan Fraser and Coraline as well. Very popular stop motion animation that we all grown to love. All right. With that being said, let's start with the top five. Anybody out there with me? All right, perfect. All right, top five for me. I love this movie. I'm a sucker for musicals, and I gotta talk about Sweeney Todd the Demon from Barber from Demon Fleece, or whatever the fuck the name is. Again, there it is. Sweeney Todd the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. I can't get the name right, but there it is. A couple of fun facts about this film. It is a musical from music created by Mr. Stephen Sondheim. It's a Broadway play that was adapted into a film by Tim Burton himself. Stephen Sondheim was very reluctant on having his play turned into a film because he was afraid that it wasn't going to be any justice to the Broadway play. It wasn't until he met Tim Burton and he had discussions about what he was envisioning that he allowed Tim Burton to proceed with his vision. Mr. Stephen Sondheim was also reluctant on Johnny Depp being the titular role, as he believed that Johnny Depp could not sing. Johnny Depp had to audition for the role despite of his many collaborations and with Tim Burton, even though Tim Burton always had him on his mind. But again, he was on the loose if he could not sing. Granted, we're going to show a scene in a few of his talents as a singer. A couple of things to know about Mr. Sweeney Todd is that Anne Hathaway was almost cast as the character Joanna, but Tim Burton wanted a complete unknown actress for the role and settled with Miss Jane Weisner. Hathaway will later appear in Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland as the White Queen. This is also the second musical that Johnny Depp has starred in. So many of you didn't know, his first musical was Cry Baby by John Waters in 1990. Fun fact, in Cry Baby, Johnny Depp does not sing. He lip syncs. So you were not hearing his voice. It's the first time in Sweeney Todd that you actually hear Johnny Depp singing. Like I mentioned before, this is the seventh collaboration. By then, it was the seventh collaboration for between Tim Burton and Johnny Depp. As the first film that he did was Edward Scissorhands, which we'll be talking about pretty soon. He followed by with Ed Wood in 1994, Sleepy Hollow, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Dark Shadows, and The Corpse Bride as well. Another fun fact that I enjoy about this film is that Sam Mendes, who is famously known for directing James Bond films like Skyfall and also American Beauty with Kevin Spacey, was originally attached to direct with Mr. Russell Crowe and the lead singer. Oh, yep, Mr. Russell Crowe. Whoever has seen the movie Les Miserables, hey, hola, primo, todo bien. Whoever has seen the movie Les Miserables knows very well that Russell Crowe can sing for shit. All right? Now, before we move on to the top four, I do want to share with all of you my favorite part of this film is, probably play the clip. So this is the song Epiphany from the film, and I just love the talent and acting, the singing voice of Johnny Depp. A lot of people criticize him, being a little bit off too. I find it perfect for the character. So. Obviously, there we see Miss Helena Bonham Carter, who actually also auditioned for the role despite being married to Tim Burton as well. She didn't want to be typecast as being the director's wife that stars in every project that he makes, so she actually auditioned multiple times. She was actually one of 5 finalists before they gave the role to her. Another curious fun fact about Sweeney Todd is that in this film, Sweeney Todd, forgot his name, Johann Campbell Scott or something like that, famously known for portraying number 1 in Stranger Things, also played Grindelwald in the Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows movie. Johnny Depp pretty much portrayed Grindelwald in the second film of the franchise Fantastic Beasts before he was recast by Mads Mikkelsen in the third film of that franchise. Cool. All right, everybody still hanging out with me? Anybody got any feedback? Anything you want to share about Sweeney Todd out there that you would like to put out there before we move on to my number four? No? All right. All right, rolling on to number four, my top five favorite with Tim Burton. I'm going to talk about Sleepy Hollow. Sleepy Hollow, directed by Tim Burton, starring Johnny Depp and Christina Ricci, along with Christopher Walken and Michael Gambon, Ian McDiarmid, Michael Gough, Casper Van Dien, who, as many know, we did an episode on Starship Troopers where Casper Van Dien was the main star. But this film itself, I watch it every Halloween season. I've always been mesmerized by the Legend of Sleepy Hollow and the Headless Horseman by Washington Irving and the character of Ichabod Crane. You know, I grew up watching the whole cartoon from the Disney show that was part of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, something like that. But seeing Tim Burton take over this mystical horror tale and gave it its gothic horror vibe that we end up seeing, it's amazing. The portrayal of Ichabod Crane by Johnny Depp is unique. He portrays him as an eccentric, out of this world character, which, if you see most of Johnny Depp's films, it's pretty much Johnny Depp playing Johnny Depp. A couple of fun facts that I like about this film is that at around 57 minutes in this film, at the three-way axe battle, Mr. Ray Park, who is famously known for portraying Darth Maul, he portrays the Headless Horseman in this film when Christopher Walken's not in the close-up shots. Johnny Depp and Casper Van Dien broke his index finger on his left hand, and he actually continued filming the scene in that battle scene. This is one of my favorite scenes right there. I just love like the visual effects of creating the Headless Horseman on this film is epic. As you can see right there, little fight scene. Johnny Depp fainting. He faints a lot in this film. Tim Burton laughs in an interview. He says that Johnny Depp is a professional fainter. Nobody else in the business can do it better than him. So, if you probably can count a couple of times that he faints in this film. Johnny Depp has never seen this film because he hates the way that he acts in it. But I gathered information later on that this is something that Johnny Depp does. He never watches any other films that he stars. You know, he'll show up at premieres and then he'll just leave right after. He has never to this date seen any film that he has made. I see a comment here I missed. You called me a scaredy cat for covering my eyes when the witch comes out in Sleepy Hollow when I was a kid. I did call you a scaredy cat? Oh, so I'm sorry, bro. I'm not gonna lie to you. When I saw this film in theaters, I actually was also afraid of the witch. I would cover my eyes too. So it's a film that, I don't do scary movies. Not that I want to consider Sleepy Hollow a scary movie, but I did cover my eyes. So if I called you a scaredy cat, my bad, bro. You know, like cousins, we just haze each other out. But you're all good over there. Like I mentioned earlier, Ray Park, who is best known for creating Darth Maul from the Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Tim Burton credits Park for giving the character the great sense of movement. The character doesn't have a head, so you don't have much else to go on. But it's because of Ray Park's job, it gives it that vitality, that life that you want from a Headless Horseman to be menacing in this film. Okay, this is one of my other favorite scenes when the Headless Horseman gets his skull and we see the transformation scene, and we get presented with Mr. Christopher Walken himself. There you go. For visual effects, this is 1999. Effects definitely have improved since then. But again, it's just Christopher Walken at his best. Granted, this is Christopher Walken's second work with Tim Burton, as he previously starred in Batman Returns as Max Shriek, if I'm not mistaken, one of the villains in that film. A curious thing to know is that after being cast as the Headless Horseman, Christopher Walken admitted to Tim Burton that he could not ride a horse. So kind of one of those scenarios where you lie on your resume and then you get the job and you have to figure out how to do the job. That was Christopher Walken right there. But again, he's a man of many talents. We all love Mr. Christopher Walken. So kudos for lying, and you couldn't portray the Headless Horseman any better. A couple of things to know.
I found this very interesting because it would have been a different picture if we ever saw these actors in this title role. For the role of Ichabod Crane, Liam Neeson, Brad Pitt, and Daniel Day Lewis were actually considered to portray Ichabod Crane. And I'll be honest with you, I think it would have been a different vibe. Um, I could probably see Daniel Day Lewis being a very method actor as he's known to be. But I don't think that would have played out pretty well overall if we saw any of those things. I think Johnny Depp was born, right? Thank you for agreeing. I think Johnny Depp was born to play characters like Ichabod Crane. And I think Johnny Depp's purpose in this world was to come across Tim Burton in his life and give us the films that he gave us. So kudos to Mr. Johnny Depp and Mr. Tim Burton for creating a beautiful masterpiece in the horror gothic genre in Sleepy Hollow. All right, moving to number 3. Now this is a classic. I watched this movie when I was a young kid. Probably I was 5, 6. I would watch every time it will air on HBO, even the Disney Channel. Even for those who are out there in Puerto Rico and Canal Cuatro Guapa, Edward Scissorhands, okay? Wait, not as charming without Depp. Oh, that is true. Not as charming without Depp, and like the Australian dance, Australian breakdancer. Yeah, let's not talk about that. Edward Scissorhands, ladies and gentlemen. What this is such a sweet film. It's like Tim Burton's version of a fairy tale. A little light on the resume. Edward Scissorhands like a fairy tale. A couple of things to keep in mind. So whenever we're watching Edward Scissorhands, the scenery, everything is like colorful and perfect. This is intentional. And I quote, the idea for the movie was inspired by a drawing that Tim Burton had done when he was a teenager. The drawing depicted a thin, sullen man with long, sharp blades for fingers. Since I like to draw since I was younger, often images will come up and I'll stay with you and I'll keep drawing them, as you can see right there on the screen. He explains the character represented him as he was in his teenage years and how the film represents much of his time growing up. He likened growing up in a suburbia to a Frankenstein movie where the suburbanites acting as the angry villagers. Burton also has stated that he has often alone and had trouble retaining friendships. I get the feeling people just get this urge to want to leave me alone for some reason. I don't know exactly why. So again, it seems like, as you may have heard, this is a personal, like a poem that he has written in screen, and it's beautiful to see. It's a fairy tale. It's a sad yet beautiful ending in a way. It's poetic. Obviously, this is the first time Tim Burton and Johnny Depp has worked together, and actually became good friends after making this film. Hence the 8, 9 films they've done together in a span of a year. This is the movie where Johnny Depp met Winona Ryder, and they started dating afterwards. And they almost became husband and wife in the early '90s until they broke it off. The entire story is meant to be seen through Edward's eyes. Which is why the neighborhood looks so fantastic. So everything you're seeing in the film, it's through the point of view of Edward, the main character portrayed by Johnny Depp. Um, though Tim Burton was unfamiliar with Johnny Depp's then popular performance in 21 Jump Street. For many of those who don't know, that was Johnny Depp's early breakout role, the TV show 21 Jump Street, which we all later on got a film with Jonah Hill and Channing Tatum, which Johnny Depp reprises his role that he played in that show. He was always Tim Burton's first choice. At the time of his casting, Depp was wanting to break out from being a teen idol status with his performance on 21 Jump Street had afforded him. And then Fox Studios executives were so worried about Edward's image that they tried to keep pictures in Depp in full costume under wraps until the release of the film. To prepare for his role, Depp watched films of silent movie actor Charles Chaplin to get an idea how to express emotion without dialogue. And this is very important right there. If you guys see Edward Scissorhands, Edward barely has any lines in the film. It's everything emotional, everything is spoken through the eyes of the character and through facial, and it tells a story. And it's again, Tim Burton has never intended to make a sequel for this film because it will rob the film of its purity. and I applaud you, Mr. Tim Burton, for not touching this. Granted, we're getting Beetlejuice. It's a film that we'll see. It may have not deserve a sequel, but we'll see in a couple of weeks. But again, I don't think films like Edward Scissorhands, for example, need to be sequeled. They should not be remade. And again, I'm probably going to say this next week when I do my MovieByte soundtrack episode. But again, I personally am still on the fence on The Crow being rebooted. I don't believe it's a franchise that needs to be rebooted. It's a legacy. It should have been left right where it ended with Brendan Lee's legacy, but more of that next week. Edward's hair, and this is a really cool one. Edward's hair is based on Robert Smith of The Cure. All right, which we're also going to talk about next week on MovieByte soundtrack. Robert Smith from The Cure, he's amazing. Tim Burton originally asked Robert Smith to do the soundtrack for Edward Scissorhands. He even sent him the script, but unfortunately, Robert Smith was busy recording Disintegration at that time, which is one of The Cure's best albums out there. And didn't know who Burton was, so he passed the opportunity, right? So that job landed on the famous Danny Elfman, who has since then collaborated with Tim Burton in many, many films. He's been nominated for Academy Awards, Grammy Awards. He used to be, he still is the vocalist of the group called Oingo Boingo. He's got very popular songs in the 80s. One of them is Weird Science from the John Hughes film. So, in the role of the villain, which is portrayed by Anthony Michael Hall, a couple of teen actors were considered before Anthony Michael Hall was cast. Sean Astin, who is famously known for portraying Rudy, also Samwise Gamgee from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, was actually considered for the role. But he turned it down as he wasn't comfortable playing a villain. We all know Mr. Sean Astin besides from his very early role, The Goonies. He's always played a good kid, and I agree with him. It would have been tough to see him playing a villain. Other actors that were considered were Christian Slater, coming off from his fame from Pump Pump the Volume and True Romance. Mr. Kiefer Sutherland as well, coming from his Flatliners era and The Lost Boys, which is one of the amazing Joel Schumacher films out there. I love The Lost Boys. I think we should definitely talk about The Lost Boys some point in October. One of the best vampire movies out there for anybody out there that can agree with me. And then also Keith Coogan, who was in the film Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, another 90s cult classic. And River Phoenix, who died at a very young, tragic age, which actually also was one of Johnny Depp's best friends before he passed away in the early 90s. He's also Joaquin's Phoenix older brother, for those who didn't know. All right. So before we move on, I do want to share one of my favorite scenes from Edward Scissorhands. So this is the eye stands. I think this is a beautiful. This is where the movie takes a turning point, and we just see the mystical and the nobility of Edward's character, and the sadness behind it, and the music again. Danny Elfman composing the mysterious gothic-y, and this is Danny Elfman who has composed the Simpsons theme song, right? And he's done numerous films out there. He created the Batman theme, which we'll talk about it soon. But again, I just think this moment right here is just beautiful. It's beautiful, and this is why I love movies. Scenes like these. This is again. And again, we can just look at the emotions. There's no lines being spoken, but yet the emotion that is driven in this film speaks for itself. Amazing scene, yeah. Thank you. Obviously, this is where the turning point, the third act of the film begins, and Edward is blamed for something that we all know that he did not intentionally try to do. All right, moving on to number 2. At this point in this countdown, I think everybody should realize where we're heading with this. So at number 2, we have Beetlejuice, right? The film that started Tim Burton's trajectory into gothic horror and comedy with Mr. Michael Keaton himself, Gina Davis, Alec Baldwin, Catherine O'Hara, and again, it's the definition of horror slapstick comedy, but again, it's Tim Burton's vision that creates Beetlejuice. The studio originally wanted to call the film House Ghost. As a joke, Tim Burton suggested the name Scared Sheetless, and was horrified when the studio actually considered it. Considered using that title. Obviously, the title was always going to be Beetlejuice, but it's amazing how sometimes studio want to control titles, and I don't think it would have panned out greatly if this was called the way they intended to do. Michael Keaton ad-libbed 90% of his lines in this film. Beetlejuice is your favorite. It was a tough one to put there, and everybody that knows me probably at this point knows which one's my number 1 film. So I'm sorry, but if it wasn't for that case, I probably would have put Beetlejuice number 1. But like I said, Michael Keaton had ad-libbed 90% of his lines. Also, despite being the title character in the film, he only has 15 minutes of screen time for a movie that lasts 90 minutes. So we only see Beetlejuice for 15 minutes of the entire movie. Everything else, it's background or his name just being mentioned. So we can find the clip of Michael Keaton, the simpatico one. I think that's a great scene that has a lot of the lines improvised. If we can pull that up in a few. The idea for the movie came after Poltergeist was a hit movie, but the idea of bad ghost was flipped. So we have good ghosts that are trying to scare people that are moving into their house away. That's the whole plot of Beetlejuice. The visual effects budget for this film was just $1 million, which is a major factor as for why Tim Burton decided to make the effects of the film look as tacky and B-movie as possible. So we can see that through like the sandworm scene, overall the Lost Souls office. There we go. This is where Michael Keaton shines at his best.
It makes me want to kiss you guys. Come on, come on, give me one. All right, let's get down to it.
Granted, I mean, Michael Keaton before Beetlejuice had done comedies all his life, you know?
Whoa! There you go. You don't have to kill anybody. Possession. Good. Learn to throw your voice. Fool your friends.
Of course, Batman. You know me well, bro. You know me well.
We just want to get some people out of our house.
I understand. Well, look, in order to do that, I'm really going to have to get to know you guys. You know, we got to get closer. Move in with you for a while. Get to be real pals. You know what I'm saying? Save that shit for later.
My wife and I would like to ask you a couple of questions.
Sure. Go ahead, shoot.
Well, for instance, what are your qualifications?
Well, I attended Juilliard. I'm a graduate of the Harvard Business School. I travel quite extensively. I lived through the Black Plague, and I had a pretty good time during that. I've seen The Exorcist about 167 times, and it
That's amazing.
Every single time I see it. Not to mention the fact that you're talking to a dead guy. Now, what do you think? You think I'm qualified?
What I mean is, can you be scary?
Oh, I know you're asking me. Can I be scary? What do you think of this? You like it?
Excuse us, please.
Sure, talk amongst yourselves.
Oh, let's go.
I know, Barbara, honey, but I think he could be of some use
No,
later
let's
on
need
the
to
road.
work something out ourselves. We just have to talk.
Yeah.
It's amazing thing. They just give Keaton the script and they tell him just do your thing. You know, it's like watching Step Brothers with Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly. You know, just do your thing. You know, the camera's rolling.
Simpatico here. Look at this. We even shop in the same
Makeup was
store.
good for a back a day movie. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael Keaton's makeup. You know,
We're like peas in a pod, the three of us. Let's face it. You want somebody out of the house. I want to get somebody out of your house. Come, look. We've been to Saturn. Hey, I've been to Saturn. Sandworms. You hate them, right?
Yep, there we go.
I hate them myself. Come on.
All right. That's Michael Keaton right there at his best. So back to the visual effects. There's one scene, and I wanted to share this with all of you. So the famous Deo sequence that we all grew to love. Mr. Tim Burton was afraid that it was going to be not well received by the audience. You know, he thought it was going to be very funny, but we all know Mr. Tim Burton turned out to be wrong with this scene, because this is the favorite scene of most people that seen Beetlejuice, the Day-O sequence. And I'm excited. Apparently, there's something similar for Beetlejuice, from what I've heard. Which is fun in a sense of a kind of a tribute. But again, this is the iconic Day-O scene from Beetlejuice.
Are you doing this?
All night on a drink of rum. Stack banana till the morning come. Daylight come and me want go home. Come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. Daylight come and me want go home. Come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. Daylight come and me want go home. Live 6 foot, 7 foot, 8 foot bunch. Daylight come and me want go home. 6 foot, 7 foot, 8 foot.
There you go. Day-O, the famous scene from Beetlejuice out there. There's another scene I want to share. Look, I never saw, obviously, this movie was 1988. I was born in 1988. I came across Beetlejuice probably when I was like 5, 6 years old, when the animated TV show was the actual thing. Anybody that grew up with Nickelodeon knows about Beetlejuice, the animated TV show. So that's where I got who Beetlejuice was. When I saw Beetlejuice for the first time, there was a scene that petrified me, and I would cover my eyes every single time that I would see it. And it's the famous Beetlejuice snake scene. And I wouldn't watch that part at all. And it's, to this day, it's still quite creepy, to be completely honest with you. But again, it's the visual effects, the stop motion animation.
Otho, you get Maxie on phone right away. We really got something here. We can turn this place into the world's leading supernatural research center. An amusement park. I'll make the presentation. Lydia will bring the ghosts.
I can't bring the ghost, Dad. They're not here. Although, can't you do something?
Perhaps, if I'm properly motivated.
There we go. But you tell me you see this and that's not creepy at all. Yeah, there you go. That's Beetlejuice for you. All right. Before we go to number one, obviously a lot of you already know my number one pick. I got a couple of honorable mentions. These are films that I enjoy watching. They couldn't make the top 5, but many people may not like them. I do. One of them is Big Fish. This was directed by Tim Burton, obviously, because we're doing a top 5 countdown for him. Originally, it was supposed to be a Steven Spielberg film, but Steven Spielberg dropped out so he could do Catch Me If You Can with Tom Hanks and Leonardo DiCaprio. The cool thing about Big Fish is it's a movie about it stars Ewan McGregor. It's a movie about a father and a son trying to reconnect, but at the same time, the son wants to find out of his father's tall tales which one is real, which one is not real. But at the end of the day, Tim Burton has said in many interviews that this was a personal project, as he filmed this when his father passed away, and his father was known to tell stories. And at the end, the film is about like whether it's true or not. It's the connection that we build with our loved ones. So if anybody out there has not ever seen Big Fish, I think it's a really sweet film to watch. especially with Ewan McGregor in it. He's amazing, and you should definitely check it out. It's a unique movie from Tim Burton himself. Okay, so definitely check out Big Fish if you have a chance. The other film that I put as an honorable mention, I enjoy watching this film. It's kind of like a guilty pleasure. I find it funny. It's a parody of bad 1950s sci-fi movies like Invaders from Planet Nine or It Came from Space, something like that. And I'm talking about Mars Attack. This was Tim Burton's attempt to make a parody film with a all-star A-list cast on there, like Jack Nicholson, Glenn Close, Pierce Brosnan, Danny DeVito. He was copying films like Towering Inferno and The Poseidon Adventure, who had all these big-name actors on it for a disaster film. And this is basically what Mars Attack is. It's an invasion of Martians, and it's completely a disaster film because they're just attacking us left and right. It's also based on a trading card game from, if I'm not mistaken, from like the 80s. But again, it's one of those weird films from Tim Burton that you can just enjoy watching, and and it's pretty cool. I mean, we have Jack Black, La Favorita de Pablo. Is that true, bro? Is she calling you out on that? But Mars Attack is a guilty pleasure. He hates it. It's a guilty pleasure. Definitely a guilty pleasure. If you want to see something bad that's good, Mars Attack makes that list, so definitely check that one out. All right, now we go to number one, and again, a lot of you know me, and I've always said that this film is one of my top 2 films of all time. You know, The Crow number 1, and then Tim Burton's 1989 Batman number 2, and I had to put that one as my number 1. Maybe I'm biased, maybe I'm not, but hey, who cares? That's my film. Tim Burton led the way with Batman. I already see the comments flowing, and you are. You know what? Fuck you, bro. I don't care. Tim Burton lead the way with Batman. Now, granted, before Batman in 1989, we did have Superman films. Superman films, when they were released, they were too colorful. They were rejected as family films. Tim Burton gave us the original Dark Knight. Okay? But it wasn't that easy to come across this. When Batman becomes a project for Warner Brothers, Tim Burton had one person in mind. It was Michael Keaton. And the backlash flew. Everybody hated that Michael Keaton was going to be Batman. To this day, he is my favorite Batman. Okay? He is the best Bruce Wayne. He's the best Batman out there. I love watching him in The Flash. That was amazing. But the story repeats itself. You know, Michael Keaton was known for making comedies, and all of a sudden you cast him to play the vengeful knight, the Dark Knight. You know, every comic book nerd in the 80s was screaming, "Fuck you, Tim Burton!" Right? Of course it's Batman. Everybody out there is bashing me. Of course it's Batman. You should know this by now. But the similar thing happened when Christopher Nolan cast Heath Ledger as the Joker. Everybody hated it. Why? Because Heath Ledger was a teen heartthrob. He was doing drama, and he was not portrayed as the Joker. Obviously, we know the history. We know Heath Ledger, God bless his soul, gave us the best Joker out there. You know, same happened with Robert Pattinson when he was cast as the Batman in Matt Reeves' The Batman. Everybody hated it. So it's just a pattern. I always say, don't judge a book by its cover. Just watch it, right? But again, Tim Burton lead the way for Batman. Because of Batman films we have now, we have the super genre. Like, we wouldn't have films like Blade with Wesley Snipes. We wouldn't have films like The Crow with Brandon Lee if Batman didn't lead the way. So, a couple of fun facts that I love about this film. And I read about this in Robin Williams' biography, not autobiography, but his biography book. So originally, Robin Williams was offered the role of the Joker when Jack Nicholson was hesitating about it. Robin Williams accepted the role. He was signed to do the Joker. When producers approached Nicholson again and told him Williams would take the part if Nicholson wouldn't, Jack Nicholson decided to take the role. And then Robin Williams was released from the project. Williams stated in his biography that he thought he was being used as bait. And not only did he refuse to play the Riddler in Batman Forever, he also refused to be involved in any Warner Brothers studio project until they would officially apologize to him. And that didn't happen till 1997 when he did Father's Day with Billy Crystal. So, in a different world out there, we would have seen Robin Williams as the Joker, and I'm not gonna lie, it might have been amazing, you know. Oh, there's a comment coming up. Jack is an evil version de Robin. I could explain yourself with that one. I'm a little confused. Michael Keaton calls himself as a logic freak. He was concerned that Batman's secret identity will in reality be fairly easy to uncover and discuss ideas with Tim Burton to better disguise the character, including the use of contact lenses. Ultimately, Keaton decided to perform Batman's voice at a lower register than he was portraying Bruce Wayne. This technique became a staple of future portrayals of Batman in film, television, and video game, especially those of the famous Kevin Conroy, who voiced Batman in the best animated series of Batman there is, the original Batman the Animated Series, and Mr. Christian Bale, that we all know how deep he goes when he plays Batman. Right? So again, this is why Michael Keaton is the best Batman. Point said. Jack Nicholson admitted in an interview that he was an enormous comic book fan in the era where Batman first appeared, and that the Joker was his favorite character from the comics. I mean, you can see it in the film. Shortly after completing the film, Tim Burton said, "I like parts of it, but the whole movie is mainly boring to me. It's okay, but it was more of a cultural phenomenon than a great movie." He also wasn't enthusiastic about how Prince songs were used in the film. Prince was in the soundtrack for the Batman film. As time has distanced him from the stressful production of the film, he has become more favorable of it. Okay? And it's a statement that I can agree to it. It's a movie that different from. There's not much fighting. It's very dialogue based. Hence, the good thing about Batman is that the movie is driven by Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson's Joker is what drives that entire film. And there's a couple of scenes I'm gonna. There's a scene that I really enjoyed that I'll share with you before we wrap up. A cool note is that Mel Gibson was actually considered to portray Bruce Wayne. But apparently he was committed to Lethal Weapon 2. And then he was considered to play Harvey Dent in Batman Forever, but he turned it down to do because he was doing Braveheart. So that's why Two-Face ended up being portrayed by Christian Bale as Mahone. That's debatable. Agree to disagree. Again, the Batman. Number one film. I know I'm biased because I love Batman, but it is what it is. All right, so before we wrap, I want to share my favorite scene from the film. This is Michael Keaton's. You can see his range. And again, I admire him as an actor. He's a great actor. But we also have one of my favorite lines in this film that Jack Nicholson will say in a few. I love this line.
I like him already.
You know, the problem was he got sloppy. You know, crazy. He started to lose it. He had a head full of bad wiring, I guess. Couldn't keep it straight up here. He was the kind of guy who couldn't hear the train till it was 2 feet from him. You know what happened to this guy, Jack?
And Nicholson's just great.
Made mistakes. And then he had to...
Got a little... There we go.
Tell me something, my friend.
danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? What? I always ask that of all my prey. I just like the sound of it.
So Danny Glover was supposed to be Robin. Yeah, he was too old for that shit, bro.
Never rub another man's rhubarb.
And there we go. John Nicholson, ladies and gentlemen, a man, a caliber actor, and I mean, he portrayed Joker. He built Joker so other actors could play the Joker. All right, so that's it. That's my top 5. Is there anybody out there that would like to share their top 5? Please do so in the comments. Follow me on Instagram, YouTube. Couple of things. Check the episode from 2 weeks ago where I did David Fincher, my top 5 on David Fincher films. And again, a friendly announcement. Next week, a special episode, MovieByte soundtracks. We're going to be analyzing The Crow's original soundtrack, how it ties into the film, just in line for The Crow's release. I will have an invited guest, Mr. Adrian, who contributed to the idea of discussing that. Maybe this builds on. There's so many good movie soundtracks out there that are worthy of analysis and tying into the film. I am so excited to talk about this. One of my favorite songs in that track list is Burned by the Cure, and I can't wait to dive into it. We got artists in that from Nine Inch Nails, who covers Joy Division's Dead Souls. We have Stone Temple Pilots with Big Empty. Lots and lots of great names in that soundtrack, and I'm so excited to dive into it. With that being told, that's it. You all have a good night. Thank you for tuning in. Anybody out there in Puerto Rico, stay safe, and I'll see you all next week.